What if the very parts of yourself you've been hiding, the messy, the marvelous, the unspoken, are the ones that will set you free? In midlife, we're often told to shrink, to quiet down, to accept invisibility like it's a rite of passage. But what if this chapter is actually about expansion, revealing more of who we are, not less? Because let's be honest, midlife women are not a monolith. We're complex, multifaceted, full of rage and tenderness, reinvention and regret, humor and heartbreak. And so many of those parts don't get revealed until we find the courage to tell our stories. That's when the magic happens. That's when we feel seen, heard, validated, and we realize we were never alone. Welcome to Pleasure in the Pause, a podcast dedicated to empowering midlife women to connect to their bodies, pleasure, and power in perimenopause, menopause, and beyond. I am your host, Gabriella Espinosa, and it is my pleasure to be here with you today. In this episode, I'm joined by the brilliant Dina Aronson, writer, editor, pro-age advocate, and co-editor of this new anthology, Midlife Private Parts, a soulful and striking collection of essays that explore the many textures of the season. There's menopause, pleasure, rage, grief, beauty, friendship, reinvention, all of it. In our conversation, Dina shares the inspiration behind this book and what sparked this project, what it was like to write her deeply personal essay on grief and her mother, how the editorial process unfolded and the courage it took for so many women to be radically honest, the cultural myths around midlife and aging she's passionate about busting, and what she hopes women walk away with after reading this book. I was so honored to contribute to this anthology with my own personal essay. We talk about the healing power of storytelling and how I healed my own internalized shame through my own story writing. And we talk about how the ripple effect of being witnessed and why sharing our midlife truths, even the most private parts, is an act of reclamation. So whether you're navigating change, looking for connection, or simply want to feel less alone in your experience, this conversation is for you. Let's dive in. Welcome, Dina.
Hello, Gabriella. Thank you so much for having me on to talk about Midlife Private Parts. And also, thank you so much for lending your beautiful, honest voice to this book.
Oh my gosh, I have Midlife Private Parts in my hands right now. Congratulations on the launch just this week. We were together just earlier this week for the launch in New York City. So empowering, and what a magical moment to gather with all the incredible writers that have contributed to this anthology. I would love to start at the beginning. Let's get right into it. What sparked the idea for Midlife Private Parts? Was there a personal moment or conversation that made you say, this book needs to exist?
I think there was really a lead up to the publishing and the ideating for Midlife Private Parts. As you know, I put it together with my co-editor, Dina Alvarez, and the two of us met in midlife, actually. We're new midlife friends, which I think is like the story behind the stories here. But we met and each of us had ideas for books. I was thinking something more in the menopause realm. I had this idea for what to expect when you can no longer expect. Dina Alvarez had a book of women's stories and anthology about mothers. But as our friendship formed and we started to talk to each other and talk to other women in this midlife space, we realized there's so much we're still not talking about. And just to back up a little, Gabriella, I think I'd started a blog back in 2020. And part of my impetus for that was a real career pivot for me. But part of the impetus for that was that I couldn't find content that was reflecting my experience as I was moving into midlife. And I had a really difficult perimenopause. I had all kinds of crazy things going on. I had no idea what was happening and I couldn't find information. So that sort of is what led me into this space. And so that had always been back of mind. And when Dina and I got together, there was just a lot of sparks around stories and around what we were hearing. And while we are talking about menopause now in a way that we weren't even just a few years ago, our conversations were something like, we're so much more than menopause, right? And we have all of these other things going on in our lives that we're not talking about. And there's so much that's shifting at this time of life. There's so much changing. And all of that can leave us feeling really alone and feeling like we're the only ones. I know I felt that way when I was in my 40s and going through all of this stuff and wondering, is there anybody else like dealing with this? And particularly when you go to a doctor and mention it and they say, oh, this is just what happens. It feels like there's not a lot of support and it feels lonely. And the two of us just really felt like we needed to put stories out so that women would be able to see themselves reflected. And, we're so underrepresented in sort of society, in media. Women over 40 make up 25% of the US population. That's like 80 million women. And I think 50 million of us are over the age of 50. And yet you don't see us in advertisements. You don't really see us in media. I think I read a statistic that said women over 50 make up like 8% of characters on television shows. We need to tell our stories because we need to feel seen in this life, and we need to work to shift a very stubborn narrative that sort of says, you know what, we get to this certain point in life and we just fade out into the background. Hell no. That is not what's happening here. It's a long-winded way of saying there wasn't like one moment, but there was just this sort of buildup to, we really need to do this. These stories need to be told. Women need to feel seen and heard and
Mm.
understood so that they can feel connected, so that they can stop thinking that maybe this is the end for them, that all the meaningful stuff has passed, and can start to see that, wow, this is like an entirely new chapter where, the possibilities really are as much and as big as you allow yourself to imagine.
I love how you are framing midlife as such a transformational time, a new chapter. And I think that really is the intention behind the book, both as a body of work and probably as a movement that you are starting here. What do you hope it offers women who are navigating their own midlife terrain?
What I hope that this book offers women is some kind of a roadmap in a sense. It's not a how-to book, but I do think in telling our stories, we make the very personal universal in
Mm,
storytelling. And so I hope that in seeing the way other women have navigated, it gives them a sense of direction, right? And it gives them comfort that, yes, this is hard. Some of this stuff is really challenging and messy, but seeing other women confront those things and come out the other side kicking and thriving, I think that provides comfort. It lets you know this is possible. I wish that I had stories like this when I was younger, in my 40s, when I was feeling stuck. I wasn't sure what was next. I hope that this gives women a space to really consider and to go deep themselves and to figure out what's next for them.
yeah, so beautiful. Thank you. I think the number one lie that we've been fed is that midlife is the end, right? That it's all downhill from there. And I feel that the stories that you've gathered, the women's voices that you've gathered here, they're just such a rich tapestry of experiences, of range of emotions that are multifaceted and rich and just gold. There's pure gold in every story here. And I feel that, yeah, it gives us hope that no, this is not the end. There is so much more on the other side. What was the process like of bringing these different essays together? How did you choose the stories and shape the emotional arc of the book? Because there's definitely an emotional arc there.
Yeah, we started connecting with women through this incredible, honestly, social media was a big sort of catalyst for cultivating relationships with women like you, Gabriella, and with so many of the incredible voices in this book. We started showing up and we started reaching out, things that sometimes took us out of our comfort zone, right? DMing a perfect stranger and dropping in and saying, hey, this is what we're working on. Would you like to be a part of it? But in terms of process, we started by putting together a list of all of the things, like all of the topics we felt would be resonant and relevant. And from there, we just reached out to women, some of whom are in the spaces under those sort of categories, and others who just were soulful and beautiful and we knew could write to whatever moved them. That's really how we went about it. And
Mm.
yeah, it was very interesting. Once we had all the essays and we had edited all the essays, it was just very, I would say we were almost guided by Zen. We both were so connected to all the stories at that point. We'd spent so much time in them and so much time putting it all together. And it felt very organic the way we did it. And I can't tell you like that there was some sort of magical process, but we just went by how it felt and how it made us feel and how we hoped it would make other women feel.
Mm. Yeah, let's talk about some of the categories. So I just saw myself in every chapter, right? There's menopause, there is midlife reinvention, there's pleasure, to which I contributed an essay, and there's beauty and fashion, there's love and loss, there's friendship, the myth of invisibility, and so much beauty, so much relatability, so much humor in this book. Were there any essays or moments that made you laugh out loud or cry or just stop you in your tracks in the best way?
All of the above, like literally all of the above. There's Wendy Aarons who laughed out loud when she talked about considering turning her son's room into a wet bar after he left for college. There were certainly tears too. I'll speak for I cried writing my essay. I cry every time I
Yeah,
read my
let's talk
essay.
about your essay. Yeah, you wrote about your relationship with your mother and the grief
Yeah.
of losing her, a topic that so many women will deeply relate to. What was it like for you to write this piece, and what did it unlock for you emotionally?
It was hard to write it. I actually knew from the start that I wanted to write about this. And interestingly, after my mom passed, that's when I got very serious on this idea for the book, for me at least, crystallized. Because I felt like had my mom lived, she would not have been well, and I would have stopped my life to take care of her. And with her passing, I felt like she left me this space. And I felt very compelled to use this space to honor her and to create something very beautiful that I hoped would help other women with things like grief and with all of these other things that we've just talked about in terms of the chapters in this book. But it was interesting, even though I knew that was what I would write to, I waited until almost the very end. Like it was percolating and marinating for over a year. But I think the interesting thing is grief is one of those things that we don't talk about. I don't know what it is in this culture. We don't talk about death and
Mm,
dying. And for me, there was such unexpected identity shifts that went on after I lost my mom. It was not something I never heard anyone talk about it this way, but I suddenly found myself just questioning everything. And it felt very weird because I was several years into my reinvention or my pivot, and I was really feeling stable and rooted in that. And then suddenly I felt like I was just like blown off my axis. I was floundering. I think when you define yourself your entire life as one of my identities was as a daughter, right? And I was so close to my mom. When that goes away, it leaves you reeling, right? So
mm,
I think sometimes we get to a certain point in life and we think, okay, we're supposed to have it all figured out. And when we don't, we think maybe something's wrong or like, why am I having such a hard time with this? Other people seem to move on. And I thought it was important to like give people permission to say, I don't know how to handle this. Right.
mm,
And I wanted to convey how I did get through it and the gift that came from it and we can talk about that too. But since she's been gone, I've had this sort of heightened sense of presence and the need to be present in a way that I didn't really have before. Yeah.
That's so beautiful. I want to just read for everyone the last line of your essay: to find light through the darkness and to continue to fly, even motherless, into worlds of new possibility. And that last line just totally, oh,
You're
I
gonna make me cry.
had to, I had to read it over again because, yeah, I think you describe losing your mom as providing you the space of possibility, right? Of holding the sadness, the grief of losing her, but of also seeing the possibility in that. That is so beautiful to read. And this term that you use, the title of your essay, Flying Motherless, right? Just those two words together, the juxtaposition of those two words, flying and motherless, just so beautiful. And I feel since I've met you, we've become friends in the last year since starting this relationship of editor and contributor to your book. And yeah, just seeing you fly with this book has been so incredibly inspiring. I'm so proud of you, Dina, for everything that you've accomplished, because I know it just started as this kernel of an idea. And even when you approached me, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. What is this book going to look like and feel like? Do I really want to contribute to this book, especially on a topic like pleasure? But I just felt like you held such a beautiful space for me to feel safe to contribute my voice to this book. I felt like you were like that prodding mom. Come on, Gabriella. You can do it, because there were moments when I said, I don't know if I can do this, Dina. I don't know. This feels so vulnerable. This is a very personal story that I'm contributing. And you just gave me permission, like this really open minded, unconditional, loving mom would, saying, it's okay, Gabriella, go ahead. It's okay. So thank you so much for that, for having that motherly presence as an editor, as holding space for the stories in this book and for me personally, because yeah, I have shared with you, but I share with everyone. It wasn't easy for me to write my essay. I was so excited when you asked me, but there were so many moments of vulnerability. I'm like, oh my gosh, the whole world is going to read this. And what are people going to think? But I knew it had to be written. I write about awakening pleasure in midlife and the journey I took to awaken pleasure in midlife and the journey I took with my husband to do that. We did it together, of just inviting him into my process of awakening pleasure. And yeah, there were some very vulnerable moments, some moments where I just had to stop, not look at it. And even when you published the book, it took me days to like, and I got the copy. It was like, it took me days. I don't know if I can read this. Okay,
That's so funny.
I had to take a breath. Okay, I'm gonna read it now. And I'm just like, oh wow, yeah. You did such a beautiful job of integrating it into this whole tapestry of stories and the arc of the story, of all the stories that you weave through the book, of finding yourself again, reinventing yourself, grief, loss, empty nesting, finding pleasure, menopause, all that. I just love the way that my story fit in there, because at the beginning I did feel like, how will this fit in? And will I just stick out like a sore thumb? But it just flowed so beautifully throughout the whole thing. So thank you so much for sharing your vulnerability, for creating that motherly, nurturing space for all of us to really open our hearts and share our essays with you, our stories. I wanted to ask you about vulnerability, because it is a thread that runs through all these essays, right? As I just
Yeah.
shared. What surprised you most about what contributors shared, or about what you found yourself revealing in your own writing?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think vulnerability is a thread that runs throughout all of these essays. And what surprised me, I think, Gabriella, and I want to back up and say thank you for being so vulnerable. I knew your piece had to be in this book because you're talking about a topic that is still so sadly like shrouded in shame. And I think women have such a hard time speaking freely about sex and pleasure and reclaiming it after years of pushing it away or giving it away. So thank you so much for that. And thank you
Mm.
for your beautiful vulnerability. I was surprised by how deeply vulnerable these writers were with us for this audience. It was my hope because I think vulnerability, and I've said this many times, like it is really the true portal to connection. There, you cannot have true connection if you don't show yourself, if you don't come as you are. And honestly, that is why I think I'm so satisfied in midlife because I feel I finally allowed myself to be vulnerable in ways that I didn't when I was younger. So these writers showed up and let themselves be seen. And I think the beauty in that is that it is going to allow other women to feel seen and reflected back in these stories. And that I was blown away by the depth and by the level and the willingness to go there in these
Mm.
stories.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I found most touching and emotionally resonant. Oh my gosh, she named the thing that we all feel and are afraid to name. Skylar Liberty Rose's essay on aging. Wow, what a brave and beautiful essay that speaks to our feelings of aging, of seeing ourselves, our aging in the mirror, our wrinkles, our folds, our crepey skin, things that we want to turn a blind eye to, maybe things that we silently speak unkindly towards when we look at the mirror. And she was able to just, oh, show that mirror to all of us, not only to herself, but to all of us and say, it's okay. It's okay to have these feelings and thoughts, right? Um,
Yes.
and really to put them in the context of where we are right now in our culture in terms of how midlife women are represented. I love that
Yeah.
story so much.
She talk about a beautifully vulnerable essay. She really, like, bears her soul in that story, and it's hard. I think so many of us struggle with the physical aspect of aging, and I think, unfortunately, like, in this culture, and it's just so stubborn and hard to change. But as women, when we're young, we're valued for our youth, the way we look. There's so much tied to that. And ultimately, when that starts to change, many of us start to feel like we don't have the same value. And the crazy thing is, I've never felt like I've had more value. I've never been smarter. I've never been more confident. I've never had more courage. And I finally feel like I can connect the dots because I have a broader view of life and a lot of lived experience. And it was just incredible to watch Skylar take us through her mind. The name of her essay is All Day I Wonder Briefly, and all of these thoughts that come in, but her ultimately reckoning and coming to this incredible place of acceptance. And I think that's another thread that kind of runs through this book is coming to this place of wellness and okayness and knowing that there is so much ahead and we are not defined by the way we look or by the number of years or candles on the cake. We have so much to offer. And as we get older and wiser, even more.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the other beautiful things about this book is that it reclaims midlife as a time of power, reinvention, reflection. What are some myths about aging or midlife you feel most passionate about busting?
Oh my God, so many. So many. It's like you're too old to start something new. You're too old to shift gears or change your path. That we become less relevant as we get older. There's just so much nonsense around aging, and there's the narrative that I was reading something the other day, women in the media portrayed as singularly excited about being grandparents, as if we don't have anything else going on or any other desires. The fact that I am seeing women and you are seeing women who are And I don't like to say just getting started because we're bringing all of our life experience with us, right? But women who are starting businesses, who are completely changing careers, who are finding love, who are having sex. There's this idea that like our reproductive ability ends and we're no longer sexual beings or we're no longer attractive to bull. And I hope that these stories will help to shift that narrative. We've done some really good work here, right? And the cultural conversation most certainly is changing. But I hope this book helps to push that along because you're going to see women in this book who are just hitting it on all cylinders in all parts of life and not because it's easy. What was really important, I think, to both of us as we were collecting these stories was to tell it like it is. No sugarcoating, no sanitizing, no platitudes. Some of this is really hard. I think that another sort of thread through and just a way to think about life in general is there's just always duality. There's always these competing things, like in my essay, holding sorrow and joy in the same hand, right? The fact that getting older can be really hard in a lot of ways, but that it can be so incredible. And I think that it's important that we allow ourselves the space to mourn what's lost, but to not stay there, to move forward and to recognize all of the incredible opportunity and possibility if you allow yourself to throw that narrative away and understand that you aren't too old to start something new. Somebody asked me recently, "You're not too old to fill in blank." And I said, "You're not too old to be a beginner." And I think for me anyway, and for a lot of us, as we get to a certain point and we're like, what will people think? I don't know how to do that. How will I just start from scratch? And what I realized, especially as I started to get into this book project, is you're never really starting from scratch because you bring your life and your experiences with you. And so while you may not have experience with a particular task, you certainly have tools and life experience and you know better how the world works. And that is all synthesized, right? And so it allows you to be a beginner, but in a way that allows you to move forward without, I don't know, the fear of failure, because I think at some point we just get comfortable with ourselves and we redefine what success looks like, right? I think there's so much to be taken from these pages and from these stories, so much
Mm.
encouragement, so much hope that even though it's not all a walk in the park, it's still pretty damn good.
Yeah, absolutely. I have talked on the podcast before with some other writers about the healing power of writing your
Mm.
story, writing your thoughts, your emotions, your feelings. And yeah, I think it was incredibly healing for me to write my story. I talk about pleasure all the time and just to notice that internalized shame that still is there, buried deep, deep, deep inside. And I think that was part of what came up for me when I was writing my essay. It was letting go of some of that shame, letting go of more of that shame. I think I have let go of a lot of it, but yeah, I was surprised to find some of it was still there. And yeah, other writers that I've spoken to, especially because we all go through things in life from childhood to midlife that create wounds, heartbreak, and some of that's still there to unpack or peel back. And I think that writing is such a powerful tool for healing what we carry, what our body carries for us. And I know that that's one of the premises of this project really is to create that collective healing for all of us, for all of our stories. And I'm a big proponent of encouraging other women to write their own midlife stories. Dina, your background is fascinating. You were an attorney turned editor to pro age advocate. How has your own midlife journey shaped your voice and vision as a writer and curator of women's stories?
Yeah, I've had lots of iterations. I started as an attorney and I did not love that. I figured that out pretty quickly. And from there, I had many years where I stayed in and around that industry. I stopped practicing and I became a law firm administrator. And then I had my own legal search consultancy for about 15 years. And what I'll say about that is in those roles, I was always telling other people's stories, right? So as a lawyer, I was telling my clients' stories. And as a recruiting consultant, I was telling my candidate stories. So I think those roles, while very different, prepared me to tell stories. And as I moved through, and particularly in that second piece of life where I had that legal search consultancy for years, I was feeling the pull to do something else. And I was feeling the pull to start to tell my own story. And so I think that that sort of shaped my desire to be a storyteller. And I just think that living through that period of time, that sort of 40 plus time where I was grappling with career, trying to figure out what was next, and grappling with my own sort of health stuff, perimenopause stuff. It was really the motivation for the pivot to writing. So the first pivot was I started my blog in 2020, Patina. And it was because I wasn't able to see myself reflected in any of the content out there. It was because I couldn't get any answers. I couldn't find stories of women who were waking up in the middle of the night at 43 years old with heart palpitations thinking they were having a heart attack. I couldn't find that. And so that really motivated me to tell stories. And so it was all of those years of storytelling for other people coupled with my own experience and feeling completely either unrepresented or misrepresented that shapes the way that I tell stories now and shaped my desire to tell stories because I didn't feel seen. So, in some ways, I think all of those experiences led me to put together the book I wanted to read.
I love that because we all have these experiences that shape our early childhood, our journey through womanhood, and we can see them as gifts, right? As gifts that we have to offer the world. So I love how your innate gifts that you cultivated during your years as an attorney really turned into this beautiful new space of sharing women's stories and have really culminated in the publishing of Midlife Private Parts. We all have those gifts to share. And that's one of the questions I often ask the clients that I work with are, what are your gifts? What are the gifts that you have to share with the world? And sometimes it catches them off guard because they're like, what? I don't have I don't have any gifts, but we all have them. And you definitely have really shared with us your gifts in this book. So thank you so much for sharing your gifts with us.
Oh, thank you for saying that. And we all have gifts. And maybe that's another takeaway from this book is for women to really think about what their gifts are so that they
Mhm.
can propel themselves into the next chapter and cultivate those gifts and use them for good and to make the changes they want to see.
Absolutely. What advice, now that you're officially an editor and a writer, what advice would you give to other women who are feeling the call to write their own midlife stories, but maybe feel unsure, scared, or maybe unworthy of sharing? How do they begin?
Honestly, I think my best advice, and I try and take it myself every day, is don't overthink it. Like, we all have stories. We are all made of stories. There's this beautiful quote from a Mozambican writer. It's something like, "We are not made of cells and atoms. We are made of stories." And unfortunately, my brain does not allow me to tell you the name of that writer, but we all have stories to tell. And doesn't have to be a Pulitzer Prize winning piece. You don't even have to publish it anywhere, but sitting down and sitting with your thoughts and thinking and excavating is, as you said so beautifully, so healing because it allows us to pull things out that maybe in our conscious day-to-day mind we aren't even aware of. Sometimes there are things buried so deep and they affect the way we move through the world, yet we're not aware. And I think when you allow yourself that quiet time and space, because when you're writing is solitary, right? Like you sit in your thoughts and I think we don't give ourselves enough time or space to do that in our busy day-to-day lives. I wanna also say, one of the surprising things about this stories and the thread through was we didn't realize until we put this all together that so much of this happened in the context of the pandemic, and it was interesting to us that, unfortunately, we had to have a world shutdown for many of us to sit and quietly and stop moving for a minute and be alone in our thoughts. And in that quiet, so much of the reckonings happened for the women in the pages of this book. And so I would say, I hope we don't have another moment in time where we all have to shut down, but let's take that as a lesson that we need to afford ourselves that time. And that can be a real luxury and it can be hard to find. But if you want to write, if you want to get these stories out of you, set it aside, find it, put it on your calendar, and sit and be in your thoughts and just let it pour out of you. There's no rules, there's no right or wrong way to do it. You just have to commit to doing it and
Mhm.
don't, again, overthink it. I'm guilty of that all the time. Why is this good enough? Who cares? It's not the words on the page, it's the act of drawing them out of yourself.
Mhm.
That's where the healing is. It's funny, there's a quote I love by Joan Didion, and I may not be saying it exactly right, but it's something like, "I don't know what I think until I write it down." That's very much describes me, and I think that's why I'm so drawn to writing because it helps me clarify my thoughts, and it helps me to understand myself and the world around me in a way that is pretty powerful.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much. That's so well said. Yeah, and I think there's such a cultural silence around the emotional layers of midlife, not just menopause or aging, but as you mentioned, grief, identity shifts, pleasure. And I feel that writing and reading these stories, can help us break down a lot of that shame, right? And rewrite the narrative. You're doing such a huge service to all of us in midlife by birthing this book in the world, both you and your co editor, Dina Alvarez. So thank you so much for what you've created for us, what you've done for us. What message do you want to send out to midlife women who read this book? If they walk away with just one thing, what do you hope it is?
I hope that they walk away feeling like it is never, ever too late to become and to change direction and to have a life that is meaningful and fulfilling and purposeful. And just because you've done things one way up until midlife doesn't mean you can't change direction and shift gears. And it doesn't invalidate the life you had up until now. It's just that there's so many shifts that are occurring, and you have permission to do what you want to do. You have permission to focus on yourself. And I think we spend so much of our younger lives focused on all other things, families, raising kids, spouses, work, and our needs get pushed aside. And the really beautiful thing about midlife for many of us, that day to day changes, the priorities can shift, and many of us find a new spaciousness in our lives. And I want women to feel that spaciousness and to give themselves permission to explore it and to create, as I say, fly into new worlds of possibility.
Yeah, wonderful. And so after putting this beautiful anthology into the world, are you already dreaming up the next project? What's next for you, Dina?
Oh my goodness. It's something I've been thinking about a lot, and I would like to continue down this road of advocacy. I guess we call it pro age advocacy. I would like to continue to help women see this time of life as one of possibility and not as an ending. And I'd like to bring women together in community. I find there's so much strength and comfort in community. I didn't have it when I was in my 40s and in the throes of raising stepkids and as a stepmom. I didn't have the mom community. And I realize now what I lacked and what I missed. I knew I needed something, but I didn't know what. And
Mm.
so I don't want any woman to feel that way now. And I think much like that experience for me that felt a little bit lonely, I think a lot of women get to midlife and feel a little bit lonely. And so I'd like to create spaces for us and communities for us where we can come together and see each other and share stories with each other and empower each other. So I don't know how that all unfolds and what it all looks like, but that's where I am now. I just think there's so much beauty in community and we need each other. And I think there's something really special that happens when we get to this point in life. And that is we shed so much of the stuff that weighs us down when we're younger, this worry what people will think of us, the need to feel like we have it all together or to show the world that we have it all together when no one ever has it all together, let's be
Mm.
honest, right? This need for perfectionism. I think a lot of that falls away and it lightens us, right? And it allows us to show up more authentically and it allows us to connect in ways that are really meaningful. I find that we're in these rooms, and Gabriella, you and I have been in them a lot now over these last several years, that you get women into a room and nobody wants to leave. There's just such a craving for that comfort and for that togetherness and for that ability to see each other and to see ourselves in each other. And I want to find a way to make that happen and to help women to find those spaces.
Yeah, no, I know you'll make that happen. And you're already doing it. You're already doing it. I always love to ask my guests who come onto the podcast, what does pleasure mean to you? How are you personally making space for connection, creativity, pleasure in your own life these days after the buzz of and craziness of putting this book out into the world?
At the moment, pleasure might mean a nap, but but more generally, I talked a little bit earlier about this heightened sense of presence when I lost my mom, and honestly, I pleasure to me now feels very tied to presence and to being present in my life and to being fully embodied. It doesn't have to be anything profound. When I'm in that state, like just walking outside and feeling sunshine on my face is so pleasurable. There's so many little things that I think when we're running through our days and checking off our lists, we miss. And there's so much beauty in our everyday life, but we have to be present for it. We have to be open to seeing it. And so I would say that pleasure to me right now means being present in life
Mm.
and being open to all of that goodness that's around us.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your presence, for sharing your wisdom, and for sharing Midlife Private Parts with the
Mm.
world. Get your hands on Midlife Private Parts. Tell us how we can do that.
So you can now, I've been talking about pre-sale for so long, but now you can actually buy the book. So it'll be in your bookstores. You can also visit our website, which is midlifeprivateparts.com. You can also find me on Instagram at Patina_life. You can find my co-editor, Dina Alvarez, at The Right Styles on Instagram. And I'm also on Substack at Patina with Dina Aronson. And my co-editor is there with A Few Good Things. So there's lots of ways to find us. Please do. Please buy the book. I do feel so proud of it because I think it's going to do what we hoped it would do, which is to really inspire women, to make them feel seen and heard, but also inspire them to move into this next chapter with enthusiasm and optimism.
Thank you so much. And I'll make sure to add all those links in the show notes. And again, thank you for your presence, Dina. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. And until next time, I can't wait to be in community with you again.
Oh, same. And Gabriella, thank you. I know that I was a pest when I was trying to get that story out of you, but I knew that your story had to be in these pages. It's just what
No,
you're doing is so important. And you are helping so many women and giving them permission to find their way back to pleasure. And
mm,
so I appreciate you and your work so much. And I appreciate you sitting down and writing your essay and trusting us to take it into the world through this book. So thank you.
Yeah, it was truly an honor to be part of the book. So thank you again for inviting me. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Pleasure in the Pause with Dina Aronson. Don't forget to order your book of Midlife Private Parts. And want to help me spread more pleasure in the world? Please share, rate, and review this episode, as this helps even more women find these enriching, empowering conversations. And one more thing, hit subscribe, because your pleasure matters.